Anxiety is a horrible, horrible illness, and it's time to stop letting it run your life. So part of the reason that I was making this video is often after I meet with a client, we come up with some things that are going to be helpful for that next week. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a request, could we record the session so that I can remember what you're saying? Or could you write the notes down afterwards so that I could have a copy of the notes? So some of the things that came out of a recent session are the following. If you accepted that you were going to feel anxious, if we knew that we could just say on a 10-point scale, you are absolutely going to be feeling a 7 of anxiety, no matter what you did, no matter what breathing you did, no matter what thoughts you changed, that's how you were going to feel. How would that change how you approached making plans to do things in your life? And here's why that's important. If we're waiting to make plans because we're waiting to see if we feel better that day, then we're never actually going to make the plans. And if we do make the plans and we're waiting that day to find out, well, do I feel up to engaging in these plans, we're probably never going to follow through with the plan because we're making it contingent on how we feel. And who knows how we're going to feel that day? Probably anxious. If we have an anxiety disorder, like what's the likelihood? Probably going to feel anxious. Just the luck of the draw if we happen to be feeling okay that morning. So what if instead we just used radical acceptance? I am going to feel anxious. I'm going to feel an anxious at a 7, and I'm going to stop trying to make plans around whether or not I'm going to feel that way. I'm just going to accept that I'm going to feel that way, and I'm not going to live a life that leads me to be depressed on top of feeling anxious, right? Because that's what happens when we don't engage in our life, when we don't do the things that we have once loved to do. Not only do we feel anxious, but we start feeling helpless and hopeless and depressed and isolated. So accept it. You're going to feel anxious. Make the plan anyway. And right now you're thinking, well, shit, what if I feel anxious during the plan and I don't want to do the plan anymore? Let's accept that too. You're probably not going to feel like doing the plan. You're going to feel anxious. Can you do it anyway? Maybe, maybe not. We'll have to see, but that's really not the important part. The important part is we have to stop trying to avoid the anxiety, because ultimately what we know is that anxiety avoided is anxiety that's worsened. So let's just accept it. You're going to feel anxious. You're going to feel anxious at a 7. Step into making the plan anyway. Okay, the second, when we feel anxious, that's bad enough. Feeling anxious about being anxious makes it doubly worse. And there's no need to do that. So again, back to the acceptance piece. If we can just accept, like, yeah, I'm not freaking feeling anxious about this. We still have to feel anxious, and that sucks, but we don't have to feel anxious about being anxious. And that's better. Okay, body scans are also a helpful way to combat anxiety, in part because anxiety robs us of focus. It always attracts our focus to some other thing, perhaps than what we want our focus to be on, probably often something that we don't want our focus to be on. So learning how to control your focus is one way to keep your thoughts from always being stolen by anxiety. So body scan simply means paying very close attention to the physical sensations that are happening in your body. And I'm doing this because you start at the top of your head. And you just notice the physical sensations that are happening there. Just kind of make a note of like, oh, it feels a little tingly. Oh, it feels a little achy. Oh gosh, my eyebrow feels kind of heavy. You'll notice all sorts of weird little things. And you don't have to do a single thing about it. Your job is just to notice, because you're attending, right? You're paying attention to something specific. And if you have trouble doing this, it might help to do it out loud. That sometimes helps with focus and attention. And then here's a cool part is when your brain does begin to wander to something else, and it will, that's awesome, because that's your moment to practice bringing your attention back to the place that you're wanting to focus on, in this case, the body scan. So what will happen, 2 things. As you notice sensation, you might think like, oh, what is that? So that's a distracted thought. That's one of the thoughts that your attention might flit away to. And then you can gently say like, oh, I had a distracted thought. And then kindly, with gentle curiosity and compassion, bring yourself right back to that body scan. Now, not with frustration, but with gentle compassion. So it's an exercise. We're just practicing. There's no like getting it right. We're just practicing, gently bringing the attention back over and over again. The other kind of secondary benefit to doing the body scan is just without even meaning to, as you notice the sensations in your body and then you leave them to notice the sensations lower in your body, these sensations start to numb just a little. So if you feel physical sensations of pain while your attention is on them, you'll notice that it might amplify just a little. That's totally normal. And then as your attention slides away onto something else, you'll notice that you don't even necessarily notice those things that you attended to before, which is kind of a cool thing to begin to pay attention to, that where your attention lands gets amplified. And so when we're depressed or anxious, our attention tends to land on things that are depressing or anxiety producing. When we start to learn to gain control of our attention and focus, we can help it to land on things that are more fulfilling for us. And then kind of tertiary gain is as you move your attention out, often you get a little bit relaxed. But we're not aiming for that. That's just, you know, a little gain that might happen on the side, but we're not. That's not our goal. Okay. The other thing to think about, so we're practicing our attention. You can use breathing for an attentional anchor. So if the body scan doesn't work for you, who cares? There's about 10 million of these exercises that you can use, and diaphragmatic breathing is one of them. I have another video that goes into lots of detail about diaphragmatic breathing. I'm going to give you just a very simple version here in case that one is a little bit troublesome for you or you're having difficulty with it. When you're first starting, forget about where the breath is happening. Like, don't worry about whether it's in your chest or your belly. Don't worry about whether you're breathing through your mouth or your nose. Who cares? Our goal here is just to have a very long, slow, extended exhale. And then a pause. And then a very gentle inhale. And you don't need to fill yourself up completely with air. You just need, like, you know, like you're sipping on your favorite drink and you really want to taste it. That kind of inhale. Just a gentle sip of an inhale. Maybe kind of filling a quarter of the way, halfway. But the real focus is on the long, slow exhale, pause. Gentle sip of air in, pause, long, slow exhale, pause. Now, don't abuse this exercise. So what I mean is lots of people are like, oh, right, great, I'll use that when I'm feeling stressed. Well, you know, it'll help a little bit when you're feeling stressed, but if you really, really want it to help you, you need to do it many times a day, every single day, no matter how you're feeling. It's especially helpful to practice when you're calm, because then you can train yourself to get very, very calm, which is where we really want to be ultimately. And then it also works a lot better when you've practiced it when you're calm to use it when you're stressed out. So imagine if we're trying to train you to swim and we throw you into the deep end of the ocean with sharks. You're not going to be quite that good at it. You don't even have any practice, and we're throwing you into practicing in the hardest circumstance possible. So we are not going to expect great effect. What we'd rather do is train you to breathe this way in the shallow end of the pool with lots of flotation devices around so that you get really, really great at it. And then you can use it much more effectively in serious stressing situations. But again, really that's a secondary benefit, because if you're doing this sort of breathing often enough, you're going to have very few crisis moments, because this is preventative. And it keeps you from having those moments nearly as frequently. And also, if you do have them, they're usually not very intense because you've gotten your baseline level of stress response much lower. I hope that helps, and I hope you have a great day.